Did you know that the story of slavery in the Americas began centuries before the United States even existed? It's a complex and somber history that reshaped continents. Let's explore how it all started. Back in the 1400s, European powers began their involvement in the trade of enslaved Africans. By 1526, long before the English colonies were established, Spanish explorers had already brought enslaved Africans to a settlement in what is now South Carolina. This was just the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade, a brutal system that became the backbone of the triangular trade connecting Europe, Africa, and the Americas. European ships would carry goods to Africa, trade them for enslaved people, transport these individuals across the Atlantic in horrific conditions, and then sell them in the Americas to labor on plantations. The ships would then return to Europe loaded with profitable crops like sugar, tobacco, and coffee, completing the cycle. Now, let's turn our focus to North America. In late August of 1619, a pivotal moment occurred. A ship called the White Lion arrived at Point Comfort, Virginia, carrying about 20 to 30 enslaved Africans. This event marks the beginning of slavery within the English colonies that would later form the United States. At first, the legal status of these individuals wasn't crystal clear. Some were treated similarly to indentured servants, who could eventually earn their freedom after a set number of years. However, this ambiguity wouldn't last long. The colonial economy, especially in places like Virginia, was booming thanks to a highly profitable crop. Growing tobacco was incredibly labor-intensive, and plantation owners constantly sought a cheap, controllable workforce. As the demand for labor skyrocketed, the colonies began to formalize a system of permanent bondage. By the 1660s, a dark, legal transformation was underway. Colonies, led by Virginia, started passing laws that established lifelong, hereditary slavery. This new legal framework was known as chattel slavery, which meant that enslaved people were no longer seen as human beings with rights, but as property or chattel. This status was passed down through the mother, meaning that a child born to an enslaved woman was automatically enslaved for life, regardless of who their father was. This cemented a system where generations of families would be born into bondage, with their bodies, their labor, and their very lives owned by another person. Over the next 2 centuries, this brutal system would see millions more Africans forcibly transported across the ocean to endure a life of forced labor. Entering the 19th century, the institution of slavery didn't weaken. It intensified. The invention of the cotton gin made processing cotton incredibly efficient, and a new king was crowned. King Cotton. The textile mills in Great Britain and the northern United States had an insatiable appetite for raw cotton, turning the American South into the world's primary supplier. This economic boom was built directly on the backs of enslaved people. The demand for their labor was higher than ever, and the domestic slave trade grew, tragically tearing families apart as individuals were sold from the Upper South to the burgeoning cotton plantations of the Deep South. By the time the American Civil War erupted in 1861, there were nearly 4 million people held in bondage in the United States. It was a nation whose immense wealth and power were deeply intertwined with this system of human exploitation. The immense suffering and brutal reality of slavery finally reached a breaking point with the American Civil War, a conflict that fundamentally tore the nation apart over the issue. The war's conclusion in 1865 brought an end to the fighting, and with it, the legal end to slavery. The passage of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution officially abolished slavery and involuntary servitude across the United States, except as a punishment for a crime. While this marked a monumental step forward, the end of slavery was not the end of the struggle for freedom and equality. The centuries of bondage left a deep and lasting legacy on the nation, one that continues to shape conversations about justice, race, and identity to this very day. Understanding this history is crucial for understanding the world we live in now. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through a difficult but essential part of our shared past. If you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more deep dives into history. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.